This company raised $1.75 billion before it ever had a single paying customer, backed by two of the most respected executives in entertainment and technology, with a content budget rivaling major Hollywood studios. 6 months after launch, it shut down completely, and its entire content library was sold off for a little over $100 million, roughly 6% of what investors had put in. This is the story of Quibi, and how the exact confidence that convinced investors to write the checks is what left the company with no plan for the one thing it never saw coming. To understand how Quibi burned through $1.75 billion in under a year, you first have to understand the specific bet it was built entirely around. Quibi, short for Quick Bites, was founded by Jeffrey Katzenberg, the former chairman of Walt Disney Studios and co-founder of DreamWorks Animation, with Meg Whitman, former CEO of eBay and Hewlett-Packard, brought on as CEO. The pitch was specific and, on paper, genuinely compelling: premium, high-budget streaming content, but built exclusively around short episodes, typically under 10 minutes, designed specifically for people watching on their phones during small pockets of downtime, commuting, waiting in line, between meetings. Katzenberg's pedigree in entertainment and Whitman's in technology and operations made the idea unusually credible to investors. Quibi wasn't pitched as a scrappy startup experiment. It was pitched and largely believed as the next major entertainment platform, built by people who had already run some of the biggest companies in media and tech. Quibi raised money at a scale almost unheard of for a pre-launch streaming platform, ultimately securing $1.75 billion in funding from major media companies and investors, including Disney, NBC Universal, and Sony, among others. The company used that capital to sign an extraordinary roster of Hollywood talent, commissioning short-form shows from directors like Steven Spielberg and Guillermo del Toro, and recruiting well-known actors across dozens of series, all built around the platform's signature short episode format. Quibi also developed a proprietary technology it called Turnstile, which let a video seamlessly reformat itself between portrait and landscape orientation depending on how a user held their phone. A genuinely novel piece of engineering built specifically to reinforce the mobile-first, on-the-go premise the entire company was designed around. By the time Quibi launched publicly on April 6, 2020, the company had spent years and hundreds of millions of dollars building content, technology, and marketing entirely in service of one specific vision: premium video, built for people who were out in the world, with only a few free minutes at a time to watch something. That vision was about to collide with a reality nobody at the company had built any contingency for. Quibi launched on April 6, 2020, roughly 3 weeks after most of the United States had entered COVID-19 lockdowns. The entire population Quibi had built its platform around, commuters, people waiting in lines, professionals moving between meetings, had, almost overnight, stopped doing any of those things. People were staying home, and streaming services built for the living room television, not the smartphone screen during a commute, were the ones seeing surging demand instead. Quibi's core value proposition hadn't become merely less appealing. For a period, it had become almost entirely irrelevant to how most people were actually spending their day. And the company had no real fallback, because the entire platform, technology, and content strategy had been built around a single specific viewing context that had just disappeared for the majority of its target audience. Here's the irony sitting at the center of this story: the same total conviction in one specific, differentiated vision. Content built exclusively for on-the-go mobile viewing, backed by the confidence of two proven media and tech executives that had convinced investors to commit $1.75 billion before a single episode existed, was the exact conviction that meant the company had built no meaningful version of itself for a world where on-the-go briefly stopped existing. Beyond the pandemic's timing, Quibi's launch also exposed basic product gaps that made its situation worse. The app initially lacked the ability to screenshot or share short clips on social media, a significant handicap for a platform whose growth, like most entertainment content in 2020, depended heavily on clips spreading organically online. It also launched without the ability to cast content to a television, a feature added only after launch, once it became clear how many potential viewers were now watching television at home rather than looking at their phones during a commute that no longer existed. Subscriber numbers came in far below the company's initial projections. Quibi had offered a 90-day free trial to attract early users, and when that trial period began ending in the summer of 2020, a large share of users didn't convert to paying subscribers. Attempts to renegotiate content deals, adjust pricing, and pursue potential acquisition or partnership discussions with other media and technology companies through mid-2020 didn't produce a viable path forward. In October 2020, just 6 months after launch, Katzenberg and Whitman announced Quibi would shut down entirely, citing the fundamental viability of the business model itself rather than any single fixable problem. The company's remaining content library and technology were later sold to Roku for approximately $100 million in early 2021, a small fraction of the $1.75 billion that had been raised. Quibi's shutdown is frequently cited as one of the fastest, most expensive failures in the history of American media and technology startups, a company that raised more money before launch than most streaming services generate in years and lasted only 6 months in the market. Roku relaunched much of Quibi's acquired content library as free, ad-supported programming on its own Roku channel platform, finding modest success with some of the same shows that had failed to attract paying Quibi subscribers just months earlier, suggesting the underlying content itself wasn't necessarily the core problem, so much as the specific subscription model and mobile-only premise it had been built around. Jeffrey Katzenberg and Meg Whitman both largely stepped back from major operating roles in entertainment and technology following Quibi's collapse, though both have remained active in investing and advisory capacities since. Quibi's story isn't really about streaming content. It's about what happens when a company builds its entire identity around one extremely specific assumption about how people live their daily lives, and how quickly total conviction in that one assumption can turn into total exposure the moment the world outside stops matching it, with no version of the business built to survive the gap. It's a pattern that shows up again and again in business history, though rarely this fast or this expensive. A genuinely well-funded, well-executed idea can still fail completely if it depends entirely on one specific condition holding true. And sometimes the condition that breaks it isn't a competitor or a mistake at all, just the world changing in a way nobody accounted for. If you'd like to understand the hidden forces shaping our global economy, help us by subscribing to our channel.